Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the increasing levels of political financial corruption in the West and how it's changed since globalization began. Now, I don't know if it necessarily means that people have become more corrupt, although that's the outcome of this. The cost of living has increased to such an extent that people who hitherto could do all right now have to find other ways of making money if they're going to live the lifestyle that they think they're entitled to. Now, politicians have been paid. Okay, I suppose, on average, a politician is paid somewhere in the region of 2 to 2.5 times the average wage. Now, the average wage in 1970 could buy you an acceptable lifestyle, but it's basic and it's sort of middle of the middle class. But today, 2.5 times the average wage in the West, and particularly in a big city, it doesn't get you anywhere. In fact, you'd be struggling to even live a modest lifestyle on that sort of money in the big city, assuming you want to buy a property or you want to rent a place in a nicer area or anything like that. So if you're thinking tree-lined street, good schools and that sort of thing, 2.5 times the average wage doesn't get it for you. In fact, if you want that sort of lifestyle in say a city like Sydney, you're looking at you need sort of 6 times the average wage plus. In fact, that would be the entry level. 6 times the average wage would be the entry level for that sort of lifestyle. And I have people, quite a few people I know that are living that lifestyle and the sort of income they have. The $5 million house and the $1.5 million yacht and so on. It takes a lot of money to play in that league. Now, corruption. I've travelled the world, as I think I've mentioned numerous times now in the videos. I've travelled the world doing business everywhere, pretty much, and relative to the West, corruption is absolutely rampant, all around the rest of the world. As soon as you get away from the advanced Western economies, and in the advanced Western economies, I include like Japan and Singapore, places like that. But as soon as you get away from there, corruption is everywhere. And there are places like India where you can't look sideways without having to bribe somebody, and other countries besides. I was in the 1/3 world country, and I had some products coming in that I needed to display to a would-be customer, and the people that spoke English well enough in the customs, they made sure it was urgent and desperate, and I had to have it. And then they demanded payment, not a vast sum of money in the overall scheme of things, like $100 US or something, but which to them was a lot of money. I mean, that's like close to a month's pay for some of these people, or a fortnight's pay maybe. So when you're working for a company, it's not that easy to just make money. You've got to account for everything, which is part of what makes the West relatively free of corruption. You've got to account for it. So I kind of got to make calls to the CEO and say, look, this is the situation. Do you want me to walk away from it? What do you want me to do? There's a guaranteed order worth some decent bucks here, but I'm going to have to grease some palms to do it. What do you want to do? And so they got someone else to handle it, so I didn't have to get my hands dirty. But that's the state. In these third world countries, it's just how they exist, it's how they live. I think it's unusual because I don't encounter it day to day in the dealings that I have in first world countries. And I don't think there's a first world country. No, there wasn't a first world country at all over decades of doing business internationally where I had to pay a bribe, or I was put in a position where I needed to, or where the company had to look after. Now there are some things that are on the margins. You can take people out for a nice lunch or something like that. It went on. It depends sort of how corruption isn't always suitcases full of money. There was a guy who was in business, and he was just adamant. He said, "Look, drugs, prostitutes are the way. If you want business, well, drugs and prostitutes are it." And he had quite a slick, quite sophisticated machine to do that sort of thing. I remember I went to deal with one company that was quite a big outfit. They didn't need to do anything, and they took me out for they just arrived at this place, and it was a brothel, a very high class brothel. So, and they were a little bit perturbed that I sort of wasn't really interested. Back in the day, I was dating this really hot chick, and I just didn't the idea of sort of having, whether I paid or someone else. I just sort of didn't like that idea. So anyway, I didn't do it. But then they offered drugs, which similarly I turned down. And I tried to get, look, guys, can we just focus on the business here? Is that all right? I mean, do you mind? Can we get on with it? And they were quite put out. I mean, as much as anything that as they would see, their hospitality had been rebuffed. So it goes on with things like that. But in terms of suitcases full of money or giving someone gifting them a waterfront mansion or something, then that's a different league. What I'm talking about is in the day-to-day business of just doing things day to day. The basics of getting things done. You don't have to bribe anybody in the West. At least I didn't, nor was it asked of me. Bribes are offered to things like to jump the queue a bit, but again, it was small potatoes, and it didn't need to be done. But when you go in the third world countries, then any opportunity to extract a bribe or to put you in a position where you have to pay it or something like that to try and prevent you from, if you want a telephone installed, we'll install the telephone in 12 months' time, or you can give us a couple of $100 US and we'll do it tomorrow. Up to you. That type of thing, and that's absolutely rampant in the third world, and it drives you crazy because things that you should be easy and straightforward. You always got to bribe, or somebody you have to bribe to get it done. So that used to concern me, but it was always the poorer countries. The more corruption there is, the poorer the country, and it's almost a chicken and egg. What makes the country poor? Is it the corruption? Or was the country poor and then came the corruption? To me, you can't get proper price signals on the quality of the service you deliver, quality of the products you deliver, the quality of the infrastructure. You can't get any of the value signals, not just price signals, but value signals, if corruption is deciding everything, which it does in nearly all these third world places. And it got to the point where traveling around these poor countries, where, by the way, that always have their collection of multi-gazillionaires, no matter how poor the peasants are. I had to make the point of, look, you don't need to do it. One third world place I was at where they were all very polite and businesslike in the office, and I went back to the hotel, and I'm sitting down having dinner, and this guy approaches me, and he's the middleman. He's the one who quietly arranges, the bribes to be paid and the gifts to be given and the largesse to be distributed, and so that no one gets their hands dirty. And that was sort of his job. And he sauntered on. And I had to explain to him numerous times, it's not needed. You just don't have to do it. And similarly, there's some Western people living in these third world countries that came to me. I don't know how they seem to sniff you out somehow, but they came to me and said, look, you can, I'll be your middleman. I'll do all the dirty work for you. So you want to pay bribes or receive them or this or that, then I'll do it for you. And it was difficult for me to understand that there's this whole world of corruption. Really, for what a lot of it is nickels and dimes, but a whole lot of corruption going there. Now, relative to the incomes that people have, the cost of living is quite high. The West was in good situation because people on an ordinary wage could actually live quite well. Didn't need to bribe anybody, didn't need to do anything. They could just live quite well, working their 5-day-a-week job and buying their ordinary 3-bedroom, 1-bath, carport house and that sort of thing. But they could support a family on that, and they wouldn't live richly or be popping champagne corks every night, but they would do okay. That's all changed. Now, there's a house I bought in 1990, and back then I paid 200,000 for it, and it was at the time it was in a nice enough area, 4-bed, 2-bath, and garage, and decent sized yard. And that same house today is worth 2.2 million. So it's 11 times. I've sold it since, but it's 11 times what I paid for it in 1990. So, but if you look at wages, they haven't gone up anywhere near that amount, average wages. So over the last 30 years in particular, people have struggled in the West to be able to live, even a middle class lifestyle, let alone a well-to-do lifestyle. And politicians have fallen into that category as well. Politicians' wages have kept more or less in line with the average wage growth, a little bit better, but nothing much. So if politicians want to live the same lifestyle today from their salary, from their income, their parliamentary income, as they did in 1970 or anywhere between 1970 and 1990, then they're going to need 3 and a bit times more income now. So say the average is 170, or they're going to need more than 500,000 a year, and that's just again to live sort of a relatively middle class life. You're not going to be living high in the hog there. So what this means is politicians have to find, if they want to live well. Now, since they cease to represent the people, and this is one of the big markers of I think, a country in decline, and one that will, its wealth will just be eviscerated in corruption. And that's where the elites don't see they have any affinity, nothing in common with, and they don't really want anything to do with the riffraff, the peasants, the hoi polloi, the voters. Now, since the globalists took over in the West, the politicians see themselves as being part of the globalist elite. Now, they don't see themselves as being representatives of the people and of the people, one of the people. They're now part of the globalist elite. Now, the globalist elite is disproportionately made up of very wealthy people, whether they've been wealthy through monopolies in business, they're bankers, finance people, or whatever, but people smugglers, drug dealers. But whatever it is, they're the wealthiest people in the world. And politicians now rub shoulders with them. They're now one of them, as the Western politicians see themselves as being one of them. But they can't live the lifestyle those people do unless they have a much higher income. And this is where politicians are trading their influence and power for money. Western politicians are doing it all over the place, whether it's contracts handed out for doing COVID masks, or whether it's producing policies that the big financial end of town finds very agreeable and pleasant, or whatever it is. It kind of doesn't matter. But the corruption, and we saw this in the European Parliament recently, where there's European politicians that are paying for, that are flacking for these corrupt Middle Eastern oil-rich governments and their goons and flunkies, and in return are being given large amounts of cash that are brought through on diplomatic bags, because they don't get checked, diplomatic bags, brought through on diplomatic bags to the people who performed the requisite service. Now, the European Parliament politicians, there's a hot young Greek chick. She's, I think she was a former news announcer and even a swimsuit model or something before that. She's hanging around with this suave, very Latin-looking Italian guy, and they're a bit of an item, and they want to lead a fancy lifestyle. They want the waterfront mansions. They want the yachts. They want the Monaco lifestyle of yachts and so on. And that takes a fuckload of money. and they're not going to make it out of the they'll do okay out of their parliamentary salary. Gee, they won't be doing it tough, but that's not good enough. They want a Monaco lifestyle, first world casino lifestyle, a James Bond lifestyle. That's what they want, and that costs a lot of money. You won't get that or even come close to it for anything less than $1 million US dollars a year. So that's the sort of cash they people who are aspiring to that need. But when I look at the politicians all across the West, if you look at say the British politicians, just their income outside of Parliament. Now, their income each year, an average, is purported to be, or allegedly, between 55 and 60,000 US dollars every year on average per politician. That's on top of their salary and their benefits and so on. Now, as soon as these people leave Parliament, they're frequently gifted numerous directorships and speaking tours and fucking book deals and the whole sort of thing. But again, they want to become very rich. They don't want to be middle class. They don't want to live in a middle class suburb in an ordinary house and having to put up with ordinary people. They're part of the globalist cabal, the globalist set now. That's what they're associated. They're not associated with the people. They're associated with the globalists, and they want that glitter and glitterati type lifestyle. And so the banks and all these institutions that are part of the globalist cabal are gifting cozy, juicy real estate deals, and you see it here in Australia. Politicians buy real estate at what seems to be an incredibly low price. And they do some renovations, and it's a nice cozy deal where they're given an interest-free loan to buy the place, and they there's a top flight renovator that comes along to do it, and then they sell it to a Chinese investor for windfall profits, and the Chinese investors paying well over the card for the property. So they buy, they're able to, quite uncanny, be able to buy real estate at an incredibly low price and sell it at an incredibly high price, and just continue doing this time after time after time. And there's politicians that, I'm thinking of one politician now. I mean, he's going to be worth $30 million, and it's all from fucking real estate speculation. None of it, nor is he the speculator. The guy's a dumb fuck. He doesn't know anything about real estate or finance. It's all fixed up for him by the bank. Another guy, he married one of these girls, like a personal trainer in a gym. He married this person, and she wasn't bad looking, but talk about a moron. And as soon as they got married, she was given a $500,000 a year job as an advisor to one of the big banks. She couldn't count to two. It's given an advisor or a special consultant, or whatever it's called. And in turn, then this politician was fed numerous real estate deals, and in return, he made sure that certain legislation went through that was favourable to the big financial end of town, and managed to nobble a few things that they didn't want. So for services rendered, he did very, very well. I mean, he'll never need to work again. And he lives that sort of Monaco, casino type lifestyle. So this is where the corruption is coming in, and these politicians, they need to make big bucks if they're to play in the same league as these globalists. Up to and including private jets and all that sort of thing. And there's a bragging rights sort of side of it as well. Guess what? I took my private Learjet to Monaco yesterday and got on my yacht. So this is the sort of thing, and this is where corruption comes in. Now, with the recent corruption scandals in Europe, I must say, as I was going around, when the bucks on the deal became big, this is in the West, when the bucks became big, then they became political, because when you see huge bucks floating around, it raises temperatures and everyone starts to get excited and so on. So it automatically, as people try to get the inside running, try to get the edge, they lobby politicians, and so at that point it got political, and also at that point corruption is likely to creep in, even in the West, on the big buck deals, the gazillion-dollar deals. But there's different forms of corruption. There's not just money in people's pocket. It's round robins of favours. For example, the government will say to a big multinational, look, we'll give you all this business. There's one multinational in Australia that controls nearly all the labour hire services into government departments. And out of that, they've done very, very well, become very rich. The consultants and the go-betweens who handle the government relationships in that labour hire thing, they're getting paid more than $1 million a year. That's the stakes we're talking about here. And these companies, multinational companies, grow very rich, but the government in return is saying, well, we'll give you all this business, but in return, you have to bring in a shitload of third world people here and bring them to Australia, and we'll give them jobs in the public service, and that's how a lot of these Indians and Pakistanis and whatnot get jobs in the public service, is through this people laundering. I mean, you could say it's legal people smuggling, which is what it is. So the government gives a monopoly to a very profitable monopoly to a company. In return, they have to bring in, again, shitloads of third world peasants and all that sort of stuff. So it's outrageous, and it's breathtaking in its scope of corruption. But so there are those sorts of things that are going on as well, with a very, very few people becoming very rich in the process. You could look at the Hunter Biden and the Biden family and all that sort of stuff as to give you the overall architecture of what corruption is looking like these days. Influence peddling and so on. So that's where corruption is coming in, and of course it's getting worse. So the change in the cost of living and the essentials, the housing and so on, that's one thing. But the next step is that the political class has detached itself from the people in the West, from the voters, and they've now attached themselves to, or been absorbed into, as the rump, if you like, of the globalist cabal. And they want to live the life that the globalists live, because again, dealing with the richest people in the world. And so these politicians fancy themselves now as rich international globalists, and to be able to live that lifestyle, you need to make a lot of money, and that's where the corruption comes in. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.